Hi, this is Jovian D'Souza and this is the presentation for SDK. So let's get started. The SDK features the following things. Firstly, it's strongly typed. It supports all Okto APIs, authentication using Google and custom JWT. It has support for iframe for the Okto widget and job management and example apps for both React and Next.js. Installing the SDK is pretty simple. It's just one line of command to install the SDK. Once the SDK is installed, to use it, we need to use the Okto provider and wrap all the children components within it. The Okto provider has two inputs, the API key and the build type. Using the SDK functions is pretty simple as well. We need to use the use Okto hook and then get the required functions we want, and we can just call the functions. Talking about job management, these APIs provide a convenient async await pattern for the client user. So basically, there are transactions like transfer tokens, transfer NFT, execute raw transactions that take time for the blockchain to process them. So this can be broken into two functions. We have a function that requests the job, and we have a function that checks whether the job is complete. So the status pooling API does this. It takes the job request, it keeps checking whether the status is complete, and accordingly it returns either a response or a timeout error. Thank you. This is for the presentation side. Let's go through the code walkthrough. Okay, so more details regarding the Okto React SDK can be found in docs. This contains all the functions you need to create your awesome application. Let's go through the code walkthrough. So the code consists of the following files: components, utils, constants, Okto provider, and types. Components consist of all the UI elements. Utils provides all the helper functions, and Okto provider is the main file that contains the core logic of the SDK. So let's have a quick walkthrough in this file. So the Okta provider has three inputs: children, API key, and build type. This is used to wrap all the important information that's going to be global throughout the application. Okay, and here we initiate an Axios instance for calling the API functions. In the Axios instance, we have two important things. We have a request interceptor and a response interceptor. The job of the request interceptor is to make sure to add the authorization token to every request, and the job of response interceptor is to check if there is a failed response, then we need to refresh the token, or else if it fails, then we also need to update the token details after refreshing it. Okay, then we have helper functions for getting the odd details from storage and updating the odd details. Um, yeah, so a refresh token is used to is called to get a new token, and authenticate, we pass the Google ID token here and we get an odd details back. There are two authentication methods. One is authenticate and second is authenticate with user ID. Authenticate is called for Google and authenticate with user ID is called for the custom JWT authorization. We then have two helper functions, make get request and make post request. These helper functions are used by the other rest of the API functions. So the get request helper function is used by get portfolio, get supported tokens, get supported networks, get user details, get wallets, and so on, so on. Similarly, the make post request is used for um, something like create wallet, transfer tokens, transfer NFTs, and so on. Yeah, we also have the job status API that like calls the function, does the pooling, and returns the result or timeout error. We also have functions for displaying the widget model and setting the theme and getting the theme for the same. Constants file provides the constants and the default values for the SDK. Yeah. So we also have a types file. So since this SDK is written in TypeScript, it's strongly typed, making the developer experience way better. And this exposes all the types that this SDK provides. Now let's look at the example app that we built and it's shipped along with the SDK. So let me just show the demo first. This is how the example app looks. So firstly, we need to authenticate using Google, and then we can enter the API key and the build type. Once we authenticate, we can call any respective functions like get portfolio, or get user details, get supported networks, get wallets, create wallets, and so on, like order history. We also have support for transfer tokens and executing raw transactions in this example APK. So let's just go through a quick walkthrough of the code for the example APK as well, uh, example app as well. Um, Firstly, we need to have a layout. In the layout, we need to have an app provider. So this app provider consists of the Okto provider, and all the children should be wrapped within this provider. As we mentioned before, the Okto provider takes in two inputs, API key and the build type. A build type here is sandbox, and API key is the one you can get from the Okto team. Then once we have this provider wrapped, we can use the Okto functions by calling the use Okto hook. This exposes all the functions that the SDK provides, such as authenticate, get portfolio, transfer tokens. Let's go through a quick walkthrough of what the example app does. Firstly, we are doing a Google authentication. We get the ID token using Next.js auth, and we pass the ID token to the authenticate method from Okto. Once we are authenticated, we can call the respective functions. For example, we have a helper component called get button, and we can pass the respective API function callbacks there. Yep. So let's look at the helper function to get a better idea. It's pretty simple. So once the user clicks the button, it will call the helper function API, and it would set the data it receives in the result, and it will show a model that displays the result. Yeah. So as you can see, integrating Okto using the React SDK is very easy, and it should be like super fast for development as well. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you. Let me know if there are any questions.